So here we are on the beautiful shores of the Monongahela. I hope I'm saying that right, in beautiful West Virginia, with a very good friend, Emily Burns.
It's good to see you again.
And you too. I love it when our paths cross. So you hail from Kentucky,
Yes.
and you're going to relate a story today, because we often think of in history we always hear about the male components, the
Right.
Simon Kentons and the Daniel Boones and stuff, but the unsung heroes were the females, I think. Without them, they'd have never got this far, I think, in terms of settlement. So you're going to be talking about Betty Harper.
Right. Betty Harper was a midwife, and she marries George Harper, and through their marriage they travel to the frontiers of Virginia, and we understand that she was taken by the Shawnee in a raid and taken to Indian country. And when she was released by Bouquet's treaty, she came back with an toddler son named Peter. He was half Shawnee.
I like the name.
Yeah, I believe you would have liked the man too. But they came through Fort Pitt and were returned to her family. George died a short term later. They had another daughter, Mary, before he passed away. And then we learn about Betty through the Reverend Dabney Shane Chronicles. We learn about her through her sons and what they're doing. So they join a church, a Baptist church. And a short time later, during the Revolution, two of her sons signed a treaty for religious freedom.
Okay.
They requested that they be able to choose their own preacher. They requested that they be able to attend the church of their choice, and that they be able to tithe also to the church of their choice, and not be mandated what church they should support.
It's going to be like a first in the colonies for such an endeavor.
You have to appreciate the spirit that, if we're going to fight for freedom, we should have freedom
in everything,
in every aspect of our lives. So around 1778, Betty packed up with several of her sons and her youngest daughter and possibly a granddaughter, and they came to Kentucky. And the first we see, they're at Fort Boonesboro.
Okay.
Two of her sons, John and Peter, signed the Corn Compact, and that was a paper that said that all the men who signed would pledge that they would take turns planting the corn crop and guarding it, so that nobody starved. Peter and John were both enrolled in the local militia. They both served admirably. Betty lost two other sons in Kentucky during those years to battles with Indians. When the first corn crop came in 79, Bryan Station sent for Mrs. Harper, and she was escorted there with an army of men on horseback. And we believe she delivered several babies after the women finally stopped starving and started getting pregnant.
I guess there would have been no lull in there when the times were tough. It just
if you don't have enough,
they wouldn't conceive
food.
Yeah.
You don't conceive. So I like to joke that that happens when you have good corn.
Yeah. It's not a joke, right?
Well, there's something to it.
So today we'd call it a midwife, right?
She was a midwife, and so the way I understand it, when you're young, you apprentice to a midwife, and you fetch and carry and observe and do all the things you're told. I believe that every man and woman had some healing cures that they learned from their parents and grandparents. But when you study with someone, you probably learn more. You don't actually become a midwife bringing other people's children into the world until you've stopped raising your own so much.
Okay.
So when you get your kids big enough that they can look after the littler ones, when they're married and moving off and starting their own families, that's when you step into the role of midwife, for certain. Peter later, he has a claim of 400 acres near Montgomery County, and he was well liked by all. The road that he lived on is named Harper Ridge Road, and always assumed it was the older white brother that it was named after.
Have you been there?
I've been there.
Yeah.
I had to go see it for myself. It's very near the site of Morgan Station, the last Indian massacre in Kentucky. And so Peter lived there. He had a cabin he built. His nephew George lived with him. And he was known to catch bear cubs and put them in a low pen so that they walked on all fours.
I remember you telling me
Yeah.
this story. This is fascinating.
He was a character, and everybody knew him. They knew him by the color of his skin and the manner in which he walked. They knew him as a half Indian, but they treated him like a brother at arms.
So essentially, he was back to the bears for a minute.
Yeah.
He was raising these bears like we would a hog. And,
Right. And then come
process-
fall, he would
Harvest them.
slaughter the bears and make jerky. And
That's
and
easier than hunting them.
Clink and Beard would talk about all the jerky he had hanging from his rafters, and I mean, he was just a man you would depend on.
Yeah.
At some point, his mother had a cabin close by, and he was going to hunt. There was a skiff of snow on, and she had asked for some pine knots so she could make salve.
Yeah.
And he stopped by Morgan Station on the way, and he forgot something and went back to Morgan Station. And he was never seen again. His horse came in. It still had the pine knots tied to it, but they never found Peter. So they kind of suspect that he was killed by Indians, and his body was never found. But
Fascinating story.
it's a wonderful story, and you have to dig to get at those stories.
Oh, I know.
They're not readily apparent. You have to keep pulling threads until it ravels out.
Yeah. I should point out to those watching that Emily's not only like a material culture sort of, I'll call you an expert, you'll probably shake your head and know that.
I don't know about
most
that.
people do, that have an expertise. But you worked at Fort Boonesborough Fort for a number of years.
I was a participant at Fort Boonesborough for about 20 years. In 2014, I think, I went to work there, and
Doing interpretation.
doing
for the public.
interpretation, medicinal herbs, natural dyes, food preservation,
You know-
anything that walked into my cabin became my new expertise.
While you're on the herbs and medicines, last year you did a session on, I think it was last year or the year before.
It was the year before, yeah.
So I should point out we're at the School of the Longhunter, and this is the 32nd year.
Yes.
Amazing.
What a great event.
Some things do last
Yeah.
these days. But Emily did a thing on herbs, and she made salve, and everyone got a container of
Yes.
it. I've used that for everything. It works for itch, mosquito bites, rashes, sunburn.
I need to bring you some more.
In my trekking, it's almost gone.
Yeah, I'll bring you some more to
In
Martin's.
my trekking
Yeah.
kit, I never go
Yeah.
anywhere without that little tin of that salve, and I use it sparingly. So
My children make fun of that salve,
do they know?
but not
they
my.
use it.
Yeah, well, my granddaughter loves it. She thinks it cures everything.
There you go. So now you have a business, quite an interesting business.
When I worked at the fort, interpreters don't make a lot of money, and it's a seasonal gig. So I started spinning yarn and knitting hats, and even though I don't work in that job anymore, it's kind of carried on. It's a great way to meet people, to talk to people. If you have something in front of you, they'll stop and ask questions, and you meet some interesting characters that way. So Wool and Weeds was born, and I go to a few shows and a few events every year, and I just keep pulling that thread of material culture to see what we can find next.
Emily made me a buffalo wool toque. We call them toques in Canada. What do
Yeah.
you call them down here?
Caps.
Caps. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you use the
And-
word toque.
Yeah, there are a few, and there are so many other names too.
That thing has kept me warm for 3 years,
Yeah.
and I do a
Yeah.
lot of winter trekking. It's an amazing.
I just
garment.
passed Nathan up in the fort, and he's kicking himself because,
He doesn't have one.
well, it's in his car. He can't find it.
Oh,
it got to the event, but
I can
now he
loan him
can't
one.
find
I brought
it.
mine along just in case.
I said that would have been really handy last night, and he
Yeah.
said, "I know,
Right.
I know."
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I'm going to put a link down below on our
great,
channel. So
great.
anybody, if you want a historic garment. And before we leave, yesterday your presentation was on building your own trade shirt.
Right. Right.
And you've undertaken, so you're on the process up at the school there of over the weekend building a complete shirt.
And now we have the question of, will it be finished? Will it not be finished? So,
Yeah, and I'm
you know,
keeping you from it. But
no, we're good.
I saw about 6 of you stitching away yesterday.
But what
so.
a fun day. It was a beautiful sunshiny day,
know.
you know, a nice breeze blowing, and you sit. And I have to think that's an entirely period appropriate moment
Historically
to
accurate.
be sitting around a table stitching a shirt
have been doing
and under the gun to get it finished before all the men go out into the world
Yeah.
to do the jobs they have to do. So
So none to harp on the gender thing, but
Yeah.
back to the female gender. You know, the men hunted, the men fished, the men fought. But without the women, well, we'd still be on the east coast of on the Atlantic coast
so
somewhere.
here's the thing: on the frontier in Kentucky, if the men are out for an extended period of time, the women are picking up that gun and they're going out to kill a turkey to feed their family.
Sure, yeah.
They're still working the fields. They're still guarding the household. They're still tending the children and
Preserving
doing
food for winter.
Yeah, so there really aren't gender roles. You know, if there are two of you on the frontier and you have to raise a cabin,
Yeah.
the woman is having to pick up that load that a man normally would have in a more settled place.
Yeah.
So we do what we have to.
This has been wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
We probably should get back to the school. I'm thinking.
Well, I'm thinking there's a good talk starting somewhere that we probably ought to get to. Yeah,
And
yeah.
we don't go, they'll give us a detention or something, right? We'll be in the principal's office.
I don't want to be in trouble.
No, Emily, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so
Are you
much.
going to be at Martin Station?
I'll be there.
I'll be there too. Look
We'll
forward
see you
to
down the
seeing
road.
Okay.